Hey there, welcome back to English in Fluency. I'm Alex, and I am really glad you clicked on this video today. Before we start, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about the answer, not just skip past it. Have you ever started learning English with so much energy, so much excitement, and then, a few weeks later, you just stopped? Maybe life got busy. Maybe you got bored. Maybe you just forgot. If that sounds like you, don't worry, because today's story is exactly for you. Stay with me until the end, because this story changed the way I think about learning anything, not just English. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to want to grab a notebook, or maybe just open your phone and start a small habit that could change your whole year. So get comfortable, maybe grab a cup of tea or coffee, and let's begin. This is a listening and speaking practice video, which means I want you to do more than just listen. When you hear a pause, or when I ask you a question, try to answer out loud, even if your English isn't perfect. Especially if your English isn't perfect. That's the whole point. Nobody becomes fluent by staying quiet. So today, we're going to follow the story of a young woman named Elena Cruz, and through her story, we're going to talk about something simple but powerful. Consistency. Not motivation, not talent. Just showing up again and again, even on the days you don't feel like it. Elena lived in a small town, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and where the biggest event of the month was the weekend market in the town square. She worked at her uncle's hardware store, selling nails, paint, and garden tools to the same neighbors she'd known her whole life. It wasn't a bad life. It was comfortable. But Elena had a dream that felt very far away from that little store. And that dream was simple. She wanted to speak English fluently. Not just enough to order food on a trip, but really speak it. The way she saw people speak it in movies and interviews online, easily, confidently, like the words just belonged to them. Now, here's a question for you before we go further. Why do you want to learn English? Pause for a second and think about your own reason. Maybe it's for a job. Maybe it's to travel. Maybe it's to talk to someone you care about. Whatever your reason is, hold on to it. Because Elena's reason is going to matter a lot later in this story. Elena's reason was her father. He had worked for years overseas, in a country where English was the main language, sending money home so Elena could study. He always told her on their weekend phone calls, "One day, you'll go further than this town, Elena. One day, the world will open up for you." And in Elena's mind, English was the key to that door. She imagined herself in a big city, working in an office with glass windows, speaking easily with people from different countries, and maybe, one day, visiting her father in his adopted country, and having a real conversation with his new colleagues and friends, not needing him to translate for her. So one Monday morning, full of energy, Elena decided this was the day. She downloaded 3 different apps on her phone. She bought a thick grammar book from the bookstore 2 towns over. She even wrote a big colorful note and stuck it on her bathroom mirror that said, "Today, I start my English journey." She studied for almost 4 hours that first day, going through verb tenses, watching videos, repeating words out loud in her bedroom until her throat felt dry. She went to bed that night feeling proud of herself, feeling like this time things were going to be different. Can you guess what happened the next day? Take a moment and think about it. If you guessed that she studied for 4 hours again, you're wrong. And actually, this happens to almost everyone, so don't feel bad if it happens to you too. The next day, Elena was tired from work. Customers kept coming into the store, her uncle asked her to reorganize the paint section, and by the time she got home, she barely had energy to eat dinner, let alone study English for hours. She told herself, "It's okay, I'll do double tomorrow." But tomorrow came, and something else got in the way. A cousin's birthday, a headache, a good show on television that she just wanted to relax and watch. Day by day, the big colorful note on her mirror started to feel less like motivation and more like guilt. 2 weeks later, the apps were still sitting on her phone, but she hadn't opened them in 9 days. The grammar book had a thin layer of dust on the cover. Elena felt something a lot of language learners feel, and maybe you've felt it too. A mix of disappointment in herself and a quiet voice saying, "Maybe you're just not the type of person who can do this." Let's pause here for a quick speaking practice. I want you to say this sentence out loud, in your own voice. "I started with a lot of energy, but I didn't continue." Say it now, out loud, even if you're sitting on a bus or in your kitchen. Good. Now try this one. "Next time, I want to be more consistent." Say it again, slower this time, focusing on each word. Great job. Let's continue the story. A few weeks passed, and Elena mostly gave up on the idea of learning English on her own. She still watched English videos sometimes, mostly for entertainment, without really trying to study them. Then, one Saturday afternoon, something happened that would quietly change everything. A man walked into the hardware store looking for wood varnish, and he was clearly not from around there. He spoke English with a friendly, relaxed accent, and when he realized the store didn't have English-speaking staff readily available, Elena's uncle called her over because she knew a little English. Elena felt her heart speed up. She walked over, smiled nervously, and tried to help him. Her sentences came out broken, mixed with long pauses while she searched for words, but somehow they managed to communicate. The man, whose name was Julian Marsh, was patient and kind. He didn't laugh at her mistakes. Actually, he complimented her. "Your English is better than you think," he said, smiling. "You just need practice, that's all." That sentence stayed in Elena's head for days. You just need practice, that's all. It was such a small comment, but it felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for a long time. It turned out Julian was staying in town for a few months, working remotely on some kind of online business while renovating an old family property nearby. Elena started seeing him around, at the market, at the small cafe near the square, and each time she practiced a little English with him, just small talk, nothing serious. But something interesting happened. Unlike her failed attempt with the apps and the grammar book, this felt easy. It felt natural. It didn't feel like homework. It felt like a real conversation with a real person. One afternoon, sitting outside the cafe with 2 cups of coffee between them, Elena admitted to Julian that she had tried to learn English seriously before, but had failed. "I studied for 4 hours the first day," she told him, half laughing at herself, half embarrassed. "And then I basically gave up after 2 weeks." Julian nodded slowly, like he had heard this story many times before. "That's the most common mistake people make," he said. "They think learning a language is about big, intense study sessions. But actually, it's the opposite. It's not about how much you do one day. It's about how many days you show up, even a little. Let's stop the story again for a moment, because this idea is really important, and I want to make sure it sticks with you. Repeat this sentence out loud. It's not about how much you do one day. It's about how many days you show up. Say it one more time, and really think about what it means for your own English learning. Are you someone who studies hard for one day and then disappears for 2 weeks? Or are you someone who does a small amount, but every single day? Think about your answer and keep listening, because Elena's next steps might give you some ideas. Julian explained something to Elena that afternoon that felt almost too simple to be true. He told her about something he called the 5-minute rule. The idea was this: instead of promising yourself an hour of study, you promise yourself just 5 minutes. 5 minutes of listening to something in English. 5 minutes of speaking out loud, even to yourself in the mirror. 5 minutes of reading one small paragraph. 5 minutes is so small, Julian said, that you can never really say you don't have time for it. And most days, once you start, you'll keep going longer anyway. But even on your worst, busiest, most exhausted day, 5 minutes is always possible. Elena was skeptical. 5 minutes seemed too small to matter. How could 5 minutes a day compare to the 4 hours she'd studied that first Monday? But she was also tired of failing, tired of feeling guilty every time she looked at that colorful note still stuck to her bathroom mirror. So she decided to try it, just to see what would happen. That night, she took down the old note and wrote a new one. This one was smaller, simpler. It just said, 5 minutes, every day. That's all. The first day of her new approach, she listened to a short English video while washing dishes. It took maybe 6 minutes. Simple, easy, nothing dramatic. The second day, she practiced saying 5 new sentences out loud while walking to work. The third day, she read one short paragraph from a children's story in English before bed. None of these felt hard. None of these felt like the exhausting 4-hour session from before. And that was exactly the point. Here's a quick practice moment for you. I want you to imagine your own 5-minute habit. What would you do for 5 minutes every day to improve your English? Say your answer out loud, in a full sentence, starting with, I will. For example, you could say, I will listen to one English song every morning. Or, I will speak to myself in English for 5 minutes before I sleep. Try it now, out loud, in your own words. Weeks passed, and Elena kept her 5-minute habit going. Some days, 5 minutes turned into 15 or 20, because once she started, she felt like continuing. Other days, especially the busy ones at the hardware store, she really did stop at exactly 5 minutes. But the key thing, the thing that made this different from her first failed attempt, was that she never skipped a day. Not one. Even on the day her car broke down and she spent hours waiting for a mechanic, she still found 5 minutes to listen to an English podcast episode on her phone while she waited. By the end of the first month, something had shifted inside Elena, something she couldn't quite explain to herself at first. Her vocabulary hadn't exploded overnight. Her grammar wasn't suddenly perfect. But something else had changed. Her relationship with English itself. It didn't feel like a mountain she had to climb anymore. It felt like a small, friendly companion she visited every day, like brushing her teeth or feeding the neighbor's cat when they went on holiday. It had become normal. It had become part of who she was, not something separate she had to force herself to do. Julian noticed the change, too. One evening, as they sat by the small fountain in the town square, he asked her, "So, how's the 5-minute rule treating you?" Elena laughed. "Honestly, I think I've done more English in the last month than I did in that entire crazy 4-hour day, and all the days after it combined." "That's the power of consistency," Julian said. "Small actions repeated over time beat big actions done once, almost every time." Let's pause again for some speaking practice. Repeat this sentence. Small actions repeated over time beat big actions done once. Now try saying it in your own words, using different vocabulary, but keeping the same meaning. Take a moment. You could say something like, "Doing a little bit every day is better than doing a lot just one time." Good. Notice how the meaning stays the same, even when the words change. That's exactly what fluency feels like. Being able to express one idea in different ways. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this story isn't going to be one of those fairy tales where everything goes perfectly from here on out. Real growth isn't a straight line, and Elena's journey definitely wasn't either. About 2 months into her new habit, she hit a wall. She woke up one Tuesday morning and just felt tired of it. Tired of listening to English videos, tired of talking to herself in the mirror, tired of trying to remember words that seemed to disappear from her memory the moment she needed them. She skipped her 5 minutes that day, and the guilt she expected to feel didn't come, which almost scared her more. The next day, she skipped again. By the end of that week, she had skipped 4 days in a row, and the old fear crept back into her mind. Maybe this was just like last time. Maybe she was going to quit again, just more slowly this time. Does this sound familiar to you? Maybe you've felt this exact thing, that quiet loss of motivation that creeps in even when you were doing so well before. If you have, say this out loud. Sometimes I lose motivation, and that's okay. It's a normal part of learning. Say it now. It's important to hear yourself say it, because so many learners think losing motivation means they've failed completely, when really, it's just part of the process. Almost everyone experiences it. It was Julian, once again, who helped Elena see things differently. He noticed she hadn't mentioned her English practice in a few days, and when he asked her about it directly, sitting on the old stone bench near the fountain, Elena admitted the truth. "I think I'm losing interest," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "Maybe I'm just not built for this kind of discipline." Julian shook his head gently. "Elena, listen to me. Discipline isn't about never feeling like quitting. Discipline is what you do after you feel like quitting. Everyone, and I mean everyone, has days, weeks even, where the motivation disappears completely. The people who succeed aren't the ones who never feel that. They're the ones who show up anyway, even for just 1 minute, until the feeling passes." That sentence, "Discipline is what you do after you feel like quitting," hit Elena hard. She had always believed that successful people simply had endless motivation, some special fire inside them that never went out. Hearing that even the most consistent people struggled with motivation too, that was almost more helpful than any grammar lesson could have been. That night, Elena didn't force herself to do a full study session. Instead, she gave herself permission to do something incredibly small. She opened one English video, just to listen for 1 minute. Just 1 minute, no pressure, no expectations. And you know what happened? After that 1 minute, she felt a tiny spark of the old curiosity return. She ended up watching the whole 7-minute video and even paused it twice to repeat sentences out loud. Let's practice something here. I want you to imagine you're having a day exactly like Elena's low motivation week. Say this sentence out loud. Today, I don't want to study, but I will try for just 1 minute. Feel how different that sentence feels compared to saying, I have to study for an hour today. One feels heavy and impossible. The other feels light, achievable, almost gentle with yourself. That gentleness, that's often the secret ingredient that keeps people going long-term. Elena got back on track that week, but slower this time, more forgiving of herself. She stopped aiming for perfection and started aiming for what she began calling showing up small. Some days were 5 minutes, some days were 45 minutes when she felt inspired, but the string of days without any English at all, the days that had scared her the most, those became rarer and rarer. 3 months into her new habit, Elena noticed something surprising happen during a conversation with Julian. They were talking about his old family property, the one he was renovating, and Elena realized halfway through the conversation that she hadn't stopped once to think in her own language and translate. The words had simply come out in English, connected, flowing, without that painful mental translation process she used to struggle with. It wasn't perfect English. Her grammar still had mistakes. Her accent was still clearly not native, but it was real, natural communication, and it felt incredible. That evening, walking home under the orange evening sky, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Real pride. Not the fragile kind that comes from one good study session, but the deep, steady kind that comes from knowing you've built something slowly, brick by brick, day by day. Let's do another practice moment together. I want you to think of one small win you've had in your own English learning. Even something tiny, like understanding a song lyric you didn't understand before, or successfully ordering food in English, or understanding a joke in an English video without subtitles. Say it out loud, starting with, I remember when I... For example, I remember when I understood a whole English movie without subtitles for the first time. Try it now, with your own real example. That memory, hold on to it, because on your hard days, that memory will remind you that progress is real, even when it feels slow. As the months went on, Elena's story took an unexpected turn. Julian, it turned out, wasn't just renovating his family property for fun. He was actually planning to open a small international guest house in the town, a place where travelers from different countries could stay while exploring the region. He needed someone who could help manage the place, someone who understood the local area but could also communicate comfortably with international guests. And one afternoon, almost casually, while they were fixing a broken shelf together in the guest house's future reception area, he asked Elena if she would consider working with him when the place opened. Elena's first reaction was fear. Real, genuine fear. My English still isn't good enough for something like that, she said quickly, almost automatically. I still make so many mistakes. Julian looked at her seriously. Elena, 4 months ago, you could barely order a coffee in English without stopping every few words. Now we're having full conversations about business plans, local history, even your father's life overseas. You're not the same person who put that first note on her mirror. You just haven't noticed the change because it happens slowly, a little every day. This is such an important lesson, and I want you to really sit with it for a second. Sometimes we don't notice our own progress because it happens gradually, day by day, and we're too close to see it clearly. It's like watching a plant grow. You don't see it growing minute by minute, but if you compare a photo from 4 months ago to today, the difference is obvious. Let's practice this idea together. Repeat this sentence. I don't always notice my progress, but it's happening, little by little. Now, I want you to think about your English journey. Compare yourself now to 6 months ago, or a year ago. Say out loud one thing you can do now in English that you couldn't do before. Take your time. This isn't a race. Elena decided to take the risk. She said yes to Julian's offer, even though fear still whispered in the back of her mind. Over the following weeks, as the guest house renovation continued, she kept practicing, kept showing up, kept doing her small daily habits, but now with a real, concrete goal in front of her. The guest house's opening day, when actual international guests would arrive, and she would need to communicate with them, welcome them, help them, all in English. The pressure could have crushed her old, fragile motivation from months before. But something had changed in Elena by now. The daily habit had become part of her identity. She wasn't trying to learn English anymore. She was becoming someone who spoke English, someone who practiced a little every single day without even thinking about it much, the same way she brushed her teeth without needing motivation for it. Opening day for the guest house finally arrived on a warm Saturday morning in early autumn. The first guests were a couple from a country far away, speaking fast, natural English, full of questions about the town, the local food, the best walking paths nearby. Elena felt her heart racing as she walked toward them with the guest registration book in her hands. For a moment, right before she spoke, all her old fears rushed back. What if she froze? What if her mind went blank, the way it used to during her early, painful practice sessions? But then, almost automatically, her training took over. The hundreds of small 5-minute sessions, the daily conversations with Julian, the months of consistent small effort, and she opened her mouth and simply spoke. "Welcome. We're so happy to have you here," she said, her voice steady, warmer and more confident than she expected. The couple smiled, clearly relieved to be greeted so kindly, and the conversation flowed from there. Questions about breakfast times, recommendations for restaurants, directions to the old church on the hill. Elena answered every question, and when she didn't know a word, she found another way to explain it. Something that would have been impossible for her a year earlier. Let's take a speaking practice break here, because this moment is a perfect example of something we should all practice. Introducing and welcoming someone in English. Repeat this sentence out loud. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here. Now imagine you're welcoming a friend to your home in English. Create your own welcome sentence and say it out loud. For example, "Welcome to my home. Please make yourself comfortable." Try creating your own version now. That first day at the guest house became, for Elena, a kind of proof, physical, real-world proof, that consistency actually works. Not motivation, not one big dramatic study session, just showing up, small and steady, day after day after day, for months. Over the following year, the guest house became successful, welcoming travelers from many different countries. Elena's English continued to grow, not through any more 4-hour study marathons, but through the same simple 5-minute rule that had started everything, now expanded naturally into real conversations, real relationships, real use. She started reading longer books in English. She began watching entire movies without subtitles. She even started keeping a small journal, writing just a few sentences in English every night before bed. Sometimes about her day, sometimes about her hopes for the future. One evening, almost exactly a year after that first conversation with Julian at the hardware store, Elena received a video call from her father overseas. It was late where he was, but he wanted to talk. Partway through their conversation, he mentioned, almost casually, that one of his colleagues, someone he worked closely with, would be visiting the region soon and would love to meet Elena, if she was comfortable meeting him and showing him around. For the first time, Elena didn't feel afraid of that idea. She felt excited. "Of course," she said. "I'd love to show him around. Tell him I'll take him to the best restaurant in town. And I promise, my English is much better than the last time you heard me try." Her father laughed, a warm, proud laugh that Elena could hear clearly even through the phone screen. "I always knew you had it in you, Elena. I just knew it would take time." Let's pause the story here for one more practice moment, because I think this next part matters a lot. I want you to think about someone in your life, a parent, a friend, a teacher, anyone who believes in your English journey, even when you don't fully believe in yourself. Say a sentence out loud about that person. You could say, "My mother always believes I can improve my English," or "My friend encourages me every time I practice." Say it now, out loud, using their real name if you'd like. A few weeks later, Elena's father's colleague did visit, a man named Thomas Whitfield, who worked in the same overseas company as her father. Elena picked him up from the small regional airport, feeling nervous in a different way this time, not the fear of making mistakes, but the simple nervousness of meeting someone new, someone connected to her father's world, the world she used to think was so far away from her own life. They spent the day together, walking through the old town, visiting the market, eating lunch at a small family-run restaurant near the square. Thomas asked her questions about her life, her work at the guest house, her plans for the future, and Elena answered easily, naturally, sometimes even making small jokes that made him laugh. At one point, sitting outside with cold drinks in the afternoon heat, Thomas said something that stayed with Elena for a long time afterward. "Your English is excellent," he said. "Honestly, I wouldn't have guessed you learned it as an adult. How long have you been studying?" Elena smiled, thinking back to that first colorful note on her bathroom mirror, the 4 exhausting hours of studying, the 2 weeks of giving up, the months of 5-minute sessions, the guest house, the small daily journal entries, all of it flashing through her mind in just a few seconds. "About 2 years," she said. But really, it wasn't studying, not in the traditional sense. It was just showing up a little every day, even when I didn't feel like it, especially when I didn't feel like it. Let's practice this exact idea together because I think it's the heart of today's whole lesson. Repeat this sentence. It wasn't studying, it was just showing up a little every day. Now, try answering this question out loud, as if someone asked you directly. How did you learn English? Give your own honest answer, even if you're still in the middle of your journey. You could say, I am learning English by practicing a little every day. Or, I am building a habit of listening and speaking English regularly. Try it now, out loud, in your own words. I want to step outside of Elena's story for a moment and talk directly to you, because I think this lesson matters more than almost anything else I could teach you about English grammar or vocabulary. Consistency beats intensity. It really does. You don't need to study for 4 hours a day to become fluent. You don't need some perfect, dramatic study plan with color-coded schedules and expensive courses. What you need is something small enough that you can do it every single day, even on your busiest, most exhausted, most unmotivated day. Maybe for you, that's 5 minutes of listening to an English podcast while you cook dinner. Maybe it's speaking to yourself in English for 5 minutes while you walk your dog. Maybe it's writing 3 sentences in a journal every night before bed. Just like Elena did. It doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be repeated, day after day, week after week, until one day, months from now, you look back and realize, just like Elena did, that you're not the same person who started this journey. Let's do one more big speaking practice section before we finish today's lesson, because I really want you to leave this video having spoken more English than when you arrived. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to pause the video after each one and answer out loud, in full sentences, using your own words and your own real experiences. First question. What is one small English habit you could start today? Something so small you could do it even on your busiest day. Pause now and answer out loud. Second question. Have you ever felt like Elena did, excited at the beginning, and then losing motivation after a few weeks? Describe what happened using your own words. Pause and answer now. Third question. What is one small win in your English learning that you're proud of, even if it feels small compared to your final goal? Say it out loud, starting with, I'm proud that I... Fourth question. Who is someone in your life who supports your English learning? And how could you tell them about your progress this week? Pause and answer out loud. Fifth and final question. If you kept a small, 5-minute daily English habit for 1 full year, where do you think you would be with your English by this time next year? Really think about this one. Pause the video and answer honestly and completely, out loud, in as much detail as you can. Great job working through those questions. I hope you actually paused and spoke out loud, because that speaking practice, even when you're alone, even when it feels a little strange talking to your phone or your laptop screen, that practice is building real muscle memory in your mouth, your brain, and your confidence. It's exactly what Elena did in her bedroom in front of the mirror, feeling a little silly at first, but slowly, steadily, becoming more comfortable with the sounds and rhythms of English. Now, before we finish, let's go back to Elena's story one final time, because there's a small, quiet ending I want to share with you. About 3 years after that first conversation in the hardware store, Elena was no longer just helping run Julian's guest house. She had started her own small side project, an online blog where she wrote, in English, about learning languages as an adult, sharing tips from her own journey with other people around the world who were struggling the same way she once had. Her first blog post began with these words, and I think they're a perfect way to end today's lesson. I am not a natural language learner. I don't have a special gift for grammar or a perfect memory for vocabulary. What I have is something much simpler. And honestly, something anyone can have if they choose it. I showed up every day. That's it. That's the whole secret. Let's say that final sentence together one more time, out loud, as our last speaking practice for today. I showed up every day. That's the whole secret. Say it now, clearly, confidently, like you really believe it, because I hope by the end of this video, you do believe it. So here's my challenge for you, and I really want you to take this seriously. Not just nod along and forget about it in 5 minutes. Right now, before you close this video, decide on your own 5-minute English habit. Something small, something realistic, something you could genuinely do even on your worst, busiest day. Maybe it's listening to one song in English. Maybe it's speaking your thoughts out loud in English for 5 minutes before bed. Maybe it's writing 3 simple sentences in a journal like Elena did. Whatever it is, decide right now. And then, and this part is really important, write it in the comments below this video. I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to know what small habit you're choosing today. Writing it publicly, sharing it with a community of other learners who are on the exact same journey as you, that accountability can make a huge difference. And honestly, seeing your comments, seeing this community grow and support each other, that's one of my favorite parts of making these videos. If this story helped you, if Elena's journey reminded you of your own struggles and hopefully gave you a little hope, please give this video a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more English learners just like you. People who are tired of starting over again and again. People who just need to hear that small, consistent steps really do work. And if you haven't already, subscribe to English in Fluency. We release new listening and speaking practice videos regularly, each one built around real stories, real emotions, and real practical English you can use in your daily life. Turn on notifications too, so you don't miss the next lesson. Because trust me, we have some incredible stories and practice sessions coming up that I think you're going to love. Before you go, I want you to do one more thing right now. While this feeling is still fresh, say this final sentence out loud, as a promise to yourself. Starting today, I will show up a little every day, and I will trust the process, even when it feels slow. Say it now, out loud, with confidence. Thank you so much for practicing with me today. Remember, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need 4 hours a day. You just need to show up again and again in small, honest, consistent steps. That's how Elena did it, and that's how you can do it too. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep practicing, keep showing up, and I promise your English will grow, quietly, steadily, one small day at a time. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.